Thank you, Greg. Thanks to the Newberry. Thanks to Chicago Map Society. Yes, I worked at Rand for the past 30 years, part of the GIS publishing team. The catalyst of this presentation is really started a couple of years ago. We knew the 100th anniversary edition was coming, so we met, all employees met in a series of meetings to come up with perhaps ideas on what we want to do, how to celebrate this. And I had been going to the Newberry a few years prior to that, and I knew they had an extensive collection of Rand atlases, other support material, because we've donated over the years quite a bit as we were downsizing throughout the last 25 years. We only have a collection of road atlases from the 1950s on, so getting access to earlier atlases was key in putting this presentation together. Tell you a little bit more about myself. I love math, always have. When I was a kid, when you have the opportunity at grade school to order books, well, my first order was a Hammond World Atlas, and I absolutely loved it. I would draw maps using the patio glass door as my light table as I was tracing out Indonesia, because that's, a very complicated coastline. And my dad would say, well, someday you're going to work at Rand McNally, as I was working on maps. I said, no way. But 12 years later, that happened. So anyway, how many people own a road atlas? Well, it's more people than I thought there would be. Hopefully after this presentation, a few more of you will get the latest edition. I put together some slides going by decade. I'm going to go fairly quickly through them. Starting in the 1920s with the 24 initial inaugural edition. I'm not going to spend much time on this. But the idea was, when I was putting this together, was perhaps to use in the editorial section of the Atlas or something online. So I wanted to show various, the covers as a timeline, and then various maps of the editions, plus any national parks, any points of interest that were opening up during that time. Like I said, I'll go through these very quickly. I'm not going to go by 20-year increments after that, to kind of go into a little bit more detail. So here we got more of the atlas. Some covers I don't have, so that's the FPO on the far left. But I think they were trying to create a brand identity with the repeating of covers. By then, they had two colors, red, and then for the 40s, for the different openings. The 50s, I tried a different style of timeline. Again, this is all just prototypes for presenting to the company as a whole, ideas that we could possibly add. There, in the 50s, I did a little bit more of stats. Something that, how many licensed drivers and et cetera, including cars at the time. For the 60s, by then we were producing pretty much custom identifiable cover for each edition. Like I said, I wasn't going to spend too much time on this, just the various iconic images of what was opening up. In the 90s, you see a little bit more national parks. I started in 91, so I'm really familiar with these. We started using more national park iconic images like arches and the Falls of Yosemite. 2000, you notice this particular color starts to dominate. It's more of a showing more of the family experiences. So we weren't showing many land or roadscapes like we were. Following decade, we transitioned back to more of the the national park images. There was always a debate whether we should show a road on the cover. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. Really was up to our editorial group. This is not a GIS decision. And then this recent decade, again, showing whatever national parks like the River Gorge opened up in 2020, and any major projects like the Seattle Tunnel. You really can't start in 1924 without going into what was the decades preceding that. And here, of course, we had vehicles that were more plentiful with Henry Ford assembly line. More roads were being built to accommodate these vehicles, maybe not the best condition roads, but roads nonetheless. And gas was relatively cheap. Our atlases back then were mostly regional, eastern U.S. or by state or grouping of states. They're called the Auto or Blaze Trails series of maps. The one person who worked at Rand was more instrumental in developing the Road Atlas, John Brink, who, as many probably already know, was a draftsman who started in late 1909. He developed a way of a broad designation and marking program using essentially cardboard. So he won the contest in terms of trying to solve how to make, let's go back to the last one, how to make the long names of the trails fit on roads in terms of a numbering system, give a little turn by turn. So him and his team went out across the country and started putting up these cardboard numbered signs. He worked with the state Department of Transportations. Let's go back. So eventually these numbers became state shields after working with, again, the Department of Transportation folks. Next slide, I want to compare the legend of 1921. We have the Oregon Trail. And again, back then, they just numbered the trails and put that number alongside the route on the map. And you're seeing Wyoming, again, in the late 20s, that means we started the Road Atlas from 1924 on. And we still have that key, the number key for the trail highway markings, but now you have the state highways listed in the legend as well, along with the trails. And you have an example for Wyoming of State Route 10. Like I said, John Brink worked with state DOTs. He visited all of the states, developed a relationship with started correspondence of updates and materials back and forth. Smart idea to work hand in hand with them. Of course, the Federal Highway Acts, 1916 and 1921, the one in 1926, where all the state representative DOTs met in Washington and elected their best state routes to be the next the first interstate routes. Choosing was obviously only between major cities. Best material of the road at that time. The newspapers and oil companies, Rand developed relationships with them even before the Road Atlas, first one in 1924. They in fact had custom ones for a couple of them. or they use their standard specifications before that. Let's talk a little bit more about the first road atlas. It was a relatively small atlas, not much more bigger than a notebook. It was either called the Junior or the Chum. And it both they have all the tourist campsites along with a listing of national parks and national monuments. It was the one in the middle is from the collection here in Newberry. It's the Crease Company, which is the forerunner to Kmart. Of course, the iconic Native American drawing on the stone with the car traveling on the road is the iconic. It's more symbol of the first road atlas that we all think of. Let's what's in the collection at the Newberry? So the 1924. It's the winners. It says on the title it has all 48 states. So other ones before that were either regional. This is the previous slide, the previous slide. In 1926, again, they introduced the red because they wanted to have the new interstate U.S. highways stand out. I'll show that right here. So highway signs, just referring to the fact that now they're on the maps. It's in the Chicago area is US 12, 14, 12. There were the interstate highways before the modern interstate highways. I'd like to point out the cartography of this is pretty interesting with the North arrow and the contours on the lake, fonts that they used. Road conditions, they're always interested in how to give the consumer, the drivers, information on what type of pavement, the paved roads that they were using or to plan their routes. I put up a legend, a more recent legend, and I think it's kind of interesting how they listed out the different materials and the roads under construction. I want to point out they say make local inquiry, and we do the same thing today. Local inquiry suggested for unpaved roads, and we do show a number of those, mostly, but still very important to show road classifications. This was an idea of our that we had in terms of picking a city that had the most change over the last 100 years. Orlando being a very good candidate, maybe like Phoenix, Las Vegas, but Las Vegas hadn't really grown in the last 50, 60 years. So just I was here pointing out the different specs and also pitching out, pointing out where the future Walt Disney World site would be. And then again, this is showing early one, the first one, and then the more recent one with a couple of iterations in between, just showing transformation of the specs, but also the development of the city and the metro area. Get into the 1930s and 40s. Again, there were similar covers, like I pointed out earlier. And we also had custom covers of specialty atlases, but also like State Farm, which we had as a customer for a very long time. I think we still do. So their cover, their image that they would want, that they're paying for, would be on the outside, along with advertisement and then in the inside covers. course, during the 30s and 40s. So I'm kind of breaking this down into 15-year, 20-year chunks. So more roads were being built through the Roosevelt New Deal program with Works Progress Administration. Of course, this opens up more roads to Americans to travel to places like the Smoky Mountains that opened up in 1933. And so, of course, it all sort of ended at the breakout of the World War II, where a lot of the cartographic effort for Rand is making more time maps for both Europe and Asia. Here's just a little bit of an imagery. So I just like the relief of this map. New Mexico area. But this is back in the two-color phase. If we have more room to add the shaded relief, now it's kind of hard with so much type, cities, and other road type text. We get into post-war, of course, more leisure time, more family vacations, and more national parks are opening up. Yeah, attractions that are opening up like Disneyland in California in 1955. I mentioned more features. Features include drive time maps, complete index of cities that are shown. More features from 53 to 57 is more or less we introduced 100 more city maps, which is quite a lot for a 3 to 4 year time period. And of course, the 1956 Interstate Administration spurred the growth even further into the next decade. So we get into the 1960s. Of course, we have our first 4-color atlas in 1960. I don't think it's the 40th edition. I think that came a few editions later. The printing, I believe, moved maybe even a little sooner from the 50s to Versailles, Kentucky. We also had a cartographic department down there in nearby Lexington, which I visited when I first started, and our distribution centers in Richmond. So all located in central Kentucky. Like I said, the distribution center is still there. So Eisenhower Act, more people traveling. The Atlas became the best-selling paperback of the time. If we can only get back to that. I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe. And by 1970, we had over 100 million licensed drivers. Okay, we get into the 1980s and the digital era. To the left. The first was 1980 edition on the upper right. That was quite an effort for those who were working back then. I think they were working on this separate from the actual edition that they were using or maintaining to that point. So it was a whole new maps, whole new design, and 250 city maps. And they, in talking with people that I used to work with who were back then, mentioned that was quite the effort and team. It was all manual. And then we started a digital program in the 80s, I believe, maybe even sooner. But I came in 1991. That's my startup brand. Solar operator. So I was doing darkroom activity, film processing, proofing of those films. Using the darkroom door, which always fascinating people. I'll get a little bit later about how we make maps, so I'll cover that in a little bit. So that was all about the first digital road atlas in 1993. I have this slide up. You need to see me any bigger. It's really too big. But again, I started out as a plotter operator. It's an image there from 1995. We had we had over 40 people in our department just working on creating a database. So it became the National Roads Database. And we slowly introduced other products besides the first atlas in '93. That was something that was produced in '92. But we started adding more and more products. We needed a bigger image center, so that came about. Again, I might go into that a little bit later, more detail. But there was many long hours back then, just trying to get the film output and the proofing. And sometimes you had to do that 6, 7 different iterations because QA people would find a mistake that we have to redo. We get into the 21st century. So that database from '93, early '90s went to 2009, where we transitioned to another database that we're currently using. And that was quite an undertaking. It took several years to do dual product or development in a product, the same resources. And during that decade, we kind of switched up how we did research. And I'll talk about research again. So that changed as well. And I want to talk a little bit about posted and unposted. Posted is just a Rand term of something we say is current. So if you find an update that just happened, or no matter how we found it, it becomes a posted update. So it goes in as soon as possible on the next edition. Of course, it has to be approved by our map editor and identify what products it will go into. Unposted is a collection of projects that we maintain that are reoccurring. They have multiple segments. Let's say interstates have different deadlines, or they're making a beltway around the city. So we might do one segment for one edition and then put it back in unposted and keep monitoring. We do this annually. And something to point out on the bottom, the arrows with the new database, this is when we transitioned from the exit numbers we used to always show as black triangles, black numbers. We went to a green box with a white type fill that sort of emulates the interstate overhead. As a result, we couldn't fit as many as we used to, which was somewhat of a drawback. It's something that we're pretty used to by now. The map production method. First, I want to talk about our different scales of maps. I have a few over there. On the left side, we have our mid-size atlas, so it has a little bit less content. It's at what we call 15,000 scale, so 15K. It's a good planning tool. It's roughly 8 by 10 and spiral, where you can get a saddle stitch book as well. And it's good for, again, traveling and pinch, just for planning. In the middle, we have our standard roughly 11 by 14 road atlas. That's at 10,000 scale. It shows even more detail. We have a large scale atlas that is same maps, but it's blown up 133%. So it helps those with failing eyesight to see a little bit better. It lays flat. It's nice spiral bound. Again, it's so whatever is a 1-page state would then be a 2-page spread, and whatever is a 2-page spread would become a 4-page spread in a large scale. So you have to do a little bit more page searching, but we have page indicators to help you there. And on the right, we have a fold map series of all the states, and that's at 5,000 scale. So we can show even more detail. We maintain this in the database. All the attributes are intelligent, so that city dots, any points of interest, have attributes that say it's at this scale or that scale. So when we generate a new map, and we can do a little bit of automatic annotation placement, we can do the cleanup but essentially we can assign whether or not a certain feature can go into a certain scale of map. So map production of the past, and this is not much that I did, but so project managers would determine how the maps would be compiled using tremendous archive. I know we had a world archive, so they can just pull whatever elements that they could reuse, perhaps, or use as a base. They use transparent materials such as Rubylith, scribe coat, peel coat, positive and negative film to create the map elements for all the pages. They would be kayaking, which is used for negatives, mapping, whether it's type masks or any other kind of masks for linear work. Again, there would be as many as 40 elements, different material, different layers that would have to be in register for whatever color of the CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, or black. And this would take a very long time, as many as 100 hours to do one map, to go back and forth, and a lot of layers involved. Get into the labels, which were one of the more time-consuming aspects of the map production. At first, it was using freehand way back when, but then they started using wax-based sheet or adhesive stripping film. So use X-Acto blades to cut out, for example, New York, and place it on a black positive film, and then they would contact this into a negative to be part of the shooting list that would go into the black final, which include any other linear black features for the four colors. And this is still somewhat of a time-consuming aspect of our production currently, but it's all on screen, of course. So we get map type placement, but we got to do cleanup. We got to make sure things are in the right reading order. They don't conflict. There's no overstrikes, of course. And then placing particular type. A little bit of a map production of recent and today. We'll talk a little bit about scribing. A little bit of using scribe coat, which is an orange material on a clear plastic material. You use a hand-mounted tripod to create linear features such as boundaries of roads. And you have different size blades within this scriber that you put in and out. And you use coastline. It would be, so an image would kind of be photographed on top of the scribe code so that you can trace over it. And then again, this would be one of those elements of the 40 or 50 that would be part of the final contacting of that particular color. And we get into the computer digitizing age of the 80s with the CAD operations. I wasn't really around back then, but that was just, that took quite a bit of effort. There's me again. For some reason, our photographic archive here at Rand kind of runs out at the 1960 points. Some of these older pictures, so I don't really want to use my image so much here, but it shows what we were doing in terms of imaging. So we used to do 4-color, process of colors, make proofs. We went to a bigger image setter in 1995 so that we can do output much quicker. This was a 42 by 63 inch piece of film. we can do multiple colors, but we can also do imposition. Now, imposition is just having all the pages in place, and this is something I did in the late 90s, working with the printers to make sure that, so when it gets put onto plate and put and run for the press, it all gets cut and bound in the right order. So you had 16-page signatures, you had 8-page signatures for the bigger pages. Eventually, by 2000 or 2003, we went direct file to the printer. So we would send them a raster file, a TIFF file, and then eventually we send them a vector file or a PDF file. And that's what we that's what we do today. So we send a page, fully assembled PDF page file. So Road Atlas research. And we always use official source material, and that's the listing of number right there. It's state DOTs, it's counties, it's also toll road agencies. And for points of interest, for cities especially, we used Chamber of Commerce. We did a yearly mailing, and this goes back to the John Rink days. So we would send out as much as 5,000 pieces of mail to these various agencies to get information from them. We would send them an atlas. They would send us their atlas back or their map of their state. And we would request if they can point out anything new or something that is worth changing. Sometimes they wouldn't provide anything. They would just send us their map and say, you figure it out. Yeah, we weren't paying them, so they're under no obligation, but it was a good relationship that lasted a long time. Like I said, from John Rink days. And eventually that dwindled down, yearly mailings. We just didn't have the capacity of the staff to do that. And that's something that eventually was phased out. I might touch on that in a little bit. I just want to say the selection of features depends on the map, and it goes back to the scale. So we'd always provide them the largest scale full map, state maps, and then we would decide, map editors would decide which features would go on to what maps. And this is a little correspondence between John Rink and Florida. Fifth edition. This is the 1927 map, so the first one would have been 1921, 22, whatever. They're pointing out problems with our maps. So they're saying in the upper, on the west coast near Tampa, they're saying this bridge is now a toll or should be a toll, and we weren't showing it. On the bottom of that, they're pointing out a spelling error for city and a river of the same name. In the middle, we have Eastern Florida, and they're just pointing out some road conditions that have improved. One in particular is south of St. Augustine towards Daytona Beach, is saying now it's graded, so we should change our specs to that. Now, the one on the right is kind of interesting, and it's of Oregon. They're in contact with the CFC, which is the Chamber of Commerce, Pendleton, which is up north from here, I believe. And it's actually signed by Brink. This is from 1931. So they were, like I said, they were corresponding back and forth every year, maybe more than once a year, to get information for whatever next, whether it's just a state map of the area or the whole Atlas series. The map research, more recent, we still use DOT, we just do it all online, of course. County maps we get also shape files from the GIS departments. We use a little less Chamber of Commerce because when we're checking our points of interest, we can extract out a list of themes like our airports or golf courses or whatever, and check that against a Bible of sorts. And then we can double check that as well. Again, I'm saying the content of the main maps must appear and agree with the city map. So whatever's the city that shows it's in the same area, we must show it on the city if it's on the stage. We also use OpenStreetMap. That's part of the free service that shows world data, world mapping service. So we're able to have our map data up on screen, then bring up a base in order to check alignments of new, let's say, new beltways that are opening up. And that's examples from me working on a state, Texas, which is a bear of the state that's working on. So we get into 24 Road Atlas updates. I just want to kind of explain the system, but so this is sort of the where is Waldo. Can you spot the differences? I'll show them in a second. But Tulsa had a number. They had 10 updates that were pretty symbolic for the kind of things that we changed. And here they are, right in the gray boxes. So just to point them out, a few of these out. So number one, the casinos in the Osage Nation changed name. So there's 2 of those. Number 2, US 412 became limited access. So it changed from an orange spec, which is just 4 lanes, or divided 4 lanes. It became a limited access highway. So that means it has interchanges, it also has overpasses. So there's no at-grade intersections. That's the rule that we have. The 3 is another point of interest. That's a water park that changed names. Number 4, airport changed names. So sometimes they go from municipal to regional or international, or the name changes themselves, either honorary name or it includes a different city. So like Daytona became Daytona Orlando, and then it's not near Orlando. Number 5 is something that the ASHTO pointed out, which is the Association of Highway State Department or Transportation Officials. They rerouted, or the town requested a rerouting to State 66 so that they can do some development downtown. So we got to pay attention to those. That's very important. And then number 6 there is the Gilcrease Expressway, which we showed under construction. That goes to it as an unposted project. And for the 24, it finally qualified to be included. So it was finishing, but we also have an extended date on when things should be finished. So, for example, the summer of next year, we'll say whatever, if it meets the cutoff date, we'll include it. So the Gilcrease Expressway is a big deal. It opens up with the bridge over Arkansas River. It opened up more access to the western side of the metro area. Here's some individual ones, just to show you maybe the details. Perhaps somebody also pay attention to. We have one in Vegas. The Sand Expo became the Venetian Expo. They bought them out. Vegas is always changing. You got the MSG Sphere that opened, which is the big lighted entertainment venue that we just opened up. Those are certain things that definitely want to show on our maps. In the center, we have a state park in coast of Northern California that changed from Patrick Point to Sioux Mag, which is more in line with the Native American name of that point. On the right, we had one for from the census in terms of this is not point that you can visit, although I guess you can, it's probably trees. But we've been showing this for decades, the population center for the lower 48 states. And we finally got the 2020 census information last year for fleet. It took a few years. So based on that, we could figure out, I'm not sure if we got it from the census or we got it from another source, but it moved approximately 12 miles towards the southwest direction of Oklahoma. So in a few decades, it might end up in Oklahoma, depending on population trends. Getting a few more, just again, a little bit smaller detail here. Bakersfield, they finished the West Side Parkway, which connected more downtown Bakersfield, so it allows quicker access to I-5, which is I think about 20 some miles west. It's now State 58, and if you notice, we didn't put the shield down there. We still have it on that orange 34, but it's a Rosedale Highway. But for the next edition, 25, we'll have that shield moved. We just didn't have confirmation at the time, but we knew that the highway was going to be finished. We just didn't know that particular information. And this on the right in Durango, again, these are really small changes, but I want to emphasize that we pay attention to the little details. There's a new alignment of US 160 into the US route that's going east and west to south Durango. And we also extended it, we're in 4 lanes for approximately 3 or 4 miles, it looks like. We do that all across the country. We add a mile or 2 here and there because people want to see where, in particular, 4-lane highways, they want to be able to really fast, so little trucks, big campers. They'll pick a route based on 4 lanes. I know I do. So that's something we pay attention to. And just a few more here. This is the State Route 30 in eastern Kentucky. As you imagine, it's got hilly terrain. So what they did here was a project that was, again, unposted. So we were monitoring this project. They straightened out the road between Hurd and Vincent. So we straightened it out as well. So mileage came down. It took almost 4 miles away from the road. Of course, increased the speed. So increased the decreased the travel time between those 2 points. Something that's an important project that we should show. This is in Lincoln, Nebraska. State Route 2 is going through downtown Lincoln. And, so they were looking, well, they had, again, another unposted project. So they're building a Southern Beltway. Again, Southern Lincoln is developing quite a lot of housing and development there. So they're looking to move people quicker to US 77, of course, to Interstate 80 from the south and on the south and southeast part of the state. So again, this is what we put into our 24 Atlas. And looking at DOT websites, they're all different. Some are really good, some not so good. You can do certain sorting, and one of the things I do is sort by dollar amount. So anything of a certain dollar amount, I've gotten pretty good at identifying what it's worth something to look at even further. $350 million is quite a bit, so I knew this is going back years when it first, because a lot of projects are proposed and may not even come to fruition a decade later, but we just still do keep tabs on them. So again, this is a important project. In fact, I didn't really have all the information, so I did call the DOT of the region to get information because I wasn't quite seeing confirmation that the State Route 2 was moved to the new Southern Bypass. And as you can tell, we downclassed the road into Lincoln as a what we call number 31 road, which is a paved road. And we assign attributes to that lower section. Then we make sure our data is nearly perfect with the intelligence of our database. This is another idea of showing a city over time, like we did Orlando. This is just with Chicago. This is what I call Chicago by a slice. Starting with 1924. So each 10 years, so that's 19. That would be, I think, 1960 if we go skip a decade there. So just showing, again, just sort of like a cartoon book, just showing the different developments of the same areas. And then or 50 years. It's interesting to show the future as we do damage for tollways and limited access. We show them under construction. So we're currently showing O'Hare access from the west. Showing like 290 extension back in 68, like about 53, another suburbs up by Chandler. Yeah, it's interesting seeing the shield specs at the time from the, I'm guessing from the late 60s, 70s. This one here, you did show construction projects for about a 7-8 year time period. So we had a staff that was doing construction for a trucking side of the business. And so these are long-term projects. So we were showing these green ribbons on highways. It kind of dates the product a little bit. You can always use it because for the most part it will get you from point A to point B. But that became a little bit more harder to keep on top of. So eventually, yeah, we just dropped that part of the I think research tools. This is a little floor plan now that I created showing the amount of updates for the past 10 years. So I've been tracking. I almost know where all the updates have happened in the last 10 years. There are updates that happen by state when we do fold maps that are renewed, but ones that I can't track, it's just impossible. But without providing numbers, these are the states that in the darker colors that have the most updates. And obviously, California and Texas being the largest, both by size and population, have the most updates. Texas in particular is the most populated, most updates. Yeah, Florida, New York, and then states like the Midwest and Georgia, Virginia. I want to point out North Carolina is a fair state as well. It's the second most updated in the country by us because of the amount of the large cities that they have, a lot of interstates, a lot of beltways around the cities. It's something I'm going to be researching the next week or two, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, I'm just going to go into some near the end here. This is for the 25th edition, so these are updates that will go into the next tablet. They're talking about changing Wayne National Forest, Southeast Ohio, to some other name than I guess Wayne was a good person. So they're talking about changing that to Buckeye National Forest, for example. I don't think it's official yet, but it's being proposed. And this would affect, of course, we show a lot of national forest segments in Ohio, but this will also affect West Virginia, because we show non-subject national forests there and in Kentucky. So again, it'll affect 3 maps for 3 states, and it'll affect 4 or 5 different products. So this is an update that generates more maps that we would have to change or correct. On the right, we have Interstate 69, which goes from southwest in the state all the way up to Michigan in the northeast section. And this is the last segment that is going to be finished by, I believe, next year. So what is State Route 37, what we've changed now to a blue limited access freeway as I-69. So we're going to change that all the way from Martinsville up to southern Indianapolis. That's a big update, and one that we'll probably tout as something, you know, we have a very old atlas. That's something you want to be able to see. And finally, this is, I think, from 1960. I just think this is a cool map. I like the relief of it. Anyway, I was going to point out the Lake Mead, which has been shrinking over the years. And I think we got an update to reduce it, although it might be going back up more to its level, maybe, if they release Lake Powell, I suppose. But so again, that's something I think it's in the 25 edition. Pretty sure it is. So that's pretty much what I had. Just wanted to cover the country and how we made the atlas over time and specs. I like to consider the Road Atlas as a time capsule for a year, a snapshot of what's going on. I very much consider it my baby in a way, because I've been working on it for probably the most amount of time for anybody who's currently looking at Rand, over 30 years. So anyway, it's been a challenging project. Like I said, I did output the first 18 years, and then the next 12 it was doing QA. I was doing other things as well as in the truck business, but basically it was output in the beginning and then QA and the primary research the last 12 years. So that's what I have. If you have any questions, thank you. If you have any questions, you'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, I have a question too. I think you actually be able to go back to, if you want to go back to the slide in Lincoln about format.
Oh, this one.
Recently, looking at maps online, if you take the horizontal street like that goes directly through the heart of Lincoln, and the one below by just it is tilted at a slight couple degrees counterclockwise. Is that due to people originally plotting it based on like the compass instead of the north? What instruments are being told to
It was whoever was doing the digitizing back then. I think in Nebraska you do have a grid system there. I'll tell them when. Yeah, I'm not sure if it is true or not true. We're not necessarily going to correct that. If it is a line that is way off, we will identify it and change it. We can check our data to make sure that we're not missing a slight alignment.
Yeah, I noticed that in Chicago, like alignments. Yeah, so here for certain segments, and then you scroll down and move down just like this. Is it a projection issue? I don't. I mean,
I can get into the details about with.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too. It's not something I've worked on in the past. So I can answer that.
In your, source of data, you don't mention satellite. Are you not using that at all?
Well, we do have satellite, and we do that as free service with our current data base. So we are able to bring the street view behind our map features. We can turn off our map features to clearly show a highway that's being built or something that might be out of line. So we do have that info. It's, yeah. I could have dived in that a little bit more, but I can't really divulge too much because we're still working on this. But yeah, we do.
You mentioned the software suite that takes you from GIS to the PDF product, and sort of related to that, you talk about generalization that manages to keep the orthogonal nature of a lot of roads.
Generalization, rectification. Yeah, we can't necessarily show things on top of each other. We have to move line work away from rivers. And we got to keep in mind that we're serving three different products on certain features. So a river or an interstate is on all three of course, if it's a major river. And so we got to pick the right scale to either generalize or rectify a road. And you mentioned about the type of PDF or the products that we are, I'm sorry,
Well, are you going all the way with ArcGIS, ArcGIS, or are you using Bentley MicroStation?
well, we're using Esri, ArcMap, so yeah. So we got we got their suite of products that we use. Their online support if we needed, the open street as backdrops. And we create files that get rendered and generated into PDFs that are assembled with the marginalia of the atlas. It's not something I really talked about. It's the headers and the legends, on-page legend, and certain aspects of what we have, page indicators, page bingos. I mean, that's all been there. It's changed a little bit over time. But yeah, we use Mac software as well to assemble. That's where, so the PDFs come out of our database as the maps, but then they get assembled in the right location in the Mac software. And that's been established for a while. So we don't change the layout so much. It's a pretty smooth process. Sorry, I was there. Answer some of your questions. Or you talk later.
So where's the future? Right, change.
Well, with the pandemic, it kind of rebounded. Obviously, more people were going outdoors because of the national park, so it was a bump in sales there. Again, I can't really disclose too much about that, but yeah, it is decreased. It used to be a lion's share of our business, and it's no secret that we've been struggling to find new revenue streams for us. But we hope that this will stay around for another 10, 20 years, hopefully. Well, still profitable. It does take a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. I think our atlas is 99.9% accurate. And it's the best atlas out there. It's just chasing that 0.1%, and finding those little things that might be a little bit off. And of course, things are constantly updating. But again, we're showing millions and millions of miles of road and hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands of points of interest. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all for coming in. Speakers office away from the people across the hall, turn on the wall, stop ice flows. Made the right choice. But again, thanks, Steve, and thank you.
Slide up for some.
Anyway, thank you so much.
So there's two different numbers. This one here is because there's one played like Nebraska.